So essentially, I mean, there's a whole backstory to how I came to Martha Washington that really has less to do about me than more about some young women that I was working with in Detroit. And at the time, I was the director of a homeless shelter, and I was working with several young women around this project of community engagement. What does it mean to be a leader in your community? And so somehow in that conversation, we got around to superheroes and this idea that there were so many issues to be dealt with in the community that you almost needed superhuman powers to be in order to like really have an impact in your community. So we came to this idea of who could be a model for that? Who could we draw inspiration from in a superhero sense? So we just started doing a lot of research because I don't really come from a background where I'm was really reading growing up a lot of comic books or knew a lot of superheroes. And these young women really didn't have a lot of experience with that as well. But for whatever reason, we really felt like a superhero, not a celebrity, but a superhero would be someone who could embody the things that we were trying to do. So we did all of this online research and no one really fit. There was Storm, and she was just it was too fantastical, right? It was like a fantasy. No one could relate to that. This idea of this woman who had the white hair and blue eyes, and it didn't really resonate with the young women. And these were young women who were living in a homeless shelter. So we came upon Martha Washington, and everything just split wide open. So Martha Washington, this regular girl, right? This regular girl who grows up in Cabrini Green projects in Chicago. And she's not a brilliant student and she's not a horrible student. She's somewhere in the middle. She's just a regular student trying to make her way in the world. And through a series of circumstances, takes on the role of a leader, becomes this hero, and then becomes this like superhuman force who's able to mobilize people, right? And so through the story of Martha Washington, which starts off really regular in a lot of ways, and then she becomes this fantasy figure, similar to the way Storm was initially, but that fantasy for the young women felt real because of where she came from and because what she represented to them. As this person who comes from, you know, a place that is very familiar to them and is able to do through sheer force of what is right, a value system and resilience and just being strong, was able to be this cult leader, right, in the comic strip. So that's how I came to Martha Washington. So I learned so much about the power of that genre, the power of that sort of narrative, right? And I think it's more than just the fact that there is the visual component. It's much more than that, right? I think there's something about how the story is told, the structure of the story in a comic book that allows that kind of connection. And I'm still trying to figure out what that is, what that allows, this sort of entree for young people, especially young people, young adults. I would say, you know, 16, between like 16 and even late 20s. I think Martha Washington completely disrupts, you know, our common everyday understanding of what it's supposed to mean to be a superhero. In the fact that I will use the word regular, and what I mean by regular is, and I would like to kind of relate this to just popular culture in general, right? If we're talking about African American culture, particularly Black youth, the way they're portrayed in the popular media is at these extremes, right? So you have the Precious story, or you have this story of these unbelievable, tragic, almost subhuman circumstances, right? And then you have like Akilah and the Bee, you know, this exceptional student who's brilliant. And there's so much in the middle that we don't get, right? So you can go see a mainstream white film and see all these layers of humanity, right? All the ways that we're just regular and beautifully human, right? And so we don't get that, especially when we talk about young Black people, whether it's through film or television. They're so polarized, right? So there seems for the regular Black girl or young Black man that you either have to be this brilliant, right, you know, savant, or, you know, basketball player, or this extreme, or you're just going to be nothing. You're going to jail. Like, and there's all this stuff in the middle. There's the B students, and these are the young women that I work with now in Newark. The B students who are wonderful and complicated and just seem regular. When I say regular, I mean how other people see them, because they feel that they are exceptional, but they understand that they don't fit in any of these two poles that they're supposed to fit into, right? And so I think what Martha Washington does is sort of celebrates that regularness and demonstrates that being regular or being everyday, the potential for that to be superhero-like, right, or superheroine-like. And we don't get that, I don't think, from other superheroes. I mean, we have Luke Cage, right, who goes to jail and has these things that happen to him through experiments, and there's ways that it's again this external thing that happens that makes that person superhuman. or it's something they're born with. You know, Superman can fly, or, but it's either something that happens that's this supernatural phenomenon that they're sort of born with, innate, something that's innate, or it's something that happens as freak accident. You know, fall into a nuclear reactor and, you know, they come out and you're the superhero. But this idea that Martha Washington presents, what I think is completely phenomenal, that all of us are really superheroes. And I know that sounds very kind of kumbaya-ish, and, you know, but I think it's true. And I think that's what's so powerful about Martha Washington, and particularly why these young women, who most of whom had never picked up a comic book and probably haven't since Martha Washington, connected, because she showed them that they already are superhuman, right? And how they can take that to the next level. And so a lot of the things that happen through this series of Martha Washington's life, you know, it's sci-fi, right? She's fighting aliens and there's all these other things that happen. But the way she's able to win is by just being her, right? She doesn't win by, you know, transforming into a reptile, right? Or becoming a storm, a windstorm. So that's what I think is really powerful about Martha Washington, and the fact that she is a black girl who then becomes a woman is revolutionary, I think. So if we talked about just the characteristics of Martha Washington, if we were just talking about even a white male figure, it would be pretty transformative, I think, for the way that we're talking about a regular person who uses their will and their value system to do these different things, right? But when this character is a black female, you know, we trace her history growing up in a really repressive state, which sounds very much like, you know, Bush era, Reagan era, and we see what she's able to do. I think that is just a revolutionary idea. Martha Washington teaches us, I believe, how to be human. And what I mean by that is how to be our best selves, and how to also accept the fact that we are flawed. We'll always be flawed. And I think we see that beautifully depicted in Martha Washington. And with such few material and support resources, what she's able to do on a global level, and I guess planetary, like I guess it is global because she ends up fighting aliens, right? So I believe that Martha Washington really is a roadmap to the complications of being human, what it means to be human. And I think it's, for me as a black feminist scholar, she really brings to life theoretically what we've been talking about for decades in black feminism. Right, the fact that black feminism is not just about black women's concerns. It's not just about black women. It's not just about the black community. But within the experiences, particularly of African American women, there's so much potential, both theoretically and in an applied sense, to talk about everybody's place in society, right? And so I think, and that's why I would love to have an opportunity to speak to Frank Miller. I wonder if he understood that, if he knew how powerful it was for that character to be a black woman, because it could have been a black boy with the same, you know, storyline. And so I'm wondering why he chose that, if he kind of understood that, you know, just the power of black womanhood. And so I think ultimately Martha Washington teaches that, how we make our way through this world with what we have, right? Always striving to acquire more. And when I say more, I don't mean consume more or buy more, but to acquire more wisdom, to acquire more compassion, to acquire more strength, right? And resiliency to fight these forces, whatever they are. We could call it the state, we could call it oppression, we could call it patriarchy, hate. She shows us that, and how to still be human, right? And that it's not easy. It was never easy for her. So to me, that is the most profound lesson.